The flag of our country does not flutter because of the winds, but it flutters because of the last breath of our soldiers who laid a supreme sacrifice in honor of that flag.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today it is an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce you all to this particular session on this very special occasion of 15 January Army Day. Indian Army always remind us all our heroes who stand strong to keep us safe. So first of all, wishing you a very happy Army Day. Let us celebrate this Army Day by saluting all our army men for their bravery, dedication and patriotism. My name is Harsh and I'm going to moderate this session for all of you, wherein I'm going to introduce you all about the event and perhaps the person who is going to interact and address all of us. First of all, I request you to kindly acknowledge and welcome the presence of our esteemed guest, Lieutenant General Ashok Bhim Siwane, who is here with us. I would like to request all the person, those who are watching this session on YouTube, to kindly applaud in the comment section and welcome the presence of our guest. Lieutenant General Ashok Bhim Siwane, a second generation army officer, is an alumnus of National Defence Academy, Pune, and joined the Indian Army in December 1978. A scholar warrior with 40 years of an outstanding career in the Indian Army, he has excelled in all spheres. During his career span, he has represented India at the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in the Guatemala, was in charge of anti-terrorist operation in J&K from 1997 to 1999. Was in charge of prospective planning and future restructuring Indian Army as ADG-PP, and finally the coveted appointment of Director General Mechanized Forces. He commanded the oldest operationally employed offensive formation of Indian Army, the Elite Strike Corps. He was awarded by the President of India Param Vishisht Seva Medal in the year 2017, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal in the year 2016, and Vishisht Seva Medal in the year 2009. Besides Chief of Army Staff Commendation and Army Commander Commendations for distinguished service of the highest order, subsequently he was bestowed the rare honor of being nominated honorary AD-Camp to President of India in July 2017. In recognition of his distinguished services, the General Officer is presently a Senior Defense Advisor, Member Board of Governors to several think tanks and defense magazines, beside the Global Legal Innovation Advisory, Drive Safe India, Environment NGOs, and Hospitality Industry. General Siwane was consultant to the Ministry of Defense Ordnance Factory Board from 2018 to 2020. And I believe his profile has so many things, so many glories, which I won't be able to explain in next few minutes. But I'm pretty sure during this conversation, we are going to learn a lot from him. So first of all, sir, I welcome you to in this session. Thank you so much for joining and agreeing to share your thoughts with us. We are extremely very happy to have you for today's talk.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. It's our pleasure too. So moving to the topic of today's session, which we have chosen is defense capabilities of India. Sir, my first question to you is, Indian Army has not only been the guardian of our territorial integrity, but has immensely contributed to nation building as the most respected institution of this nation. How do you see the role of Indian Army in this vast canvas?
Okay, thank you. Jai Hind and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here on this platform of Freak Folks Honest Talks. Very frankly, in the lighter vein, I was wondering what is freaky about the Freak Folks and the contradiction in the second half, which is the Honest Talks. So what I plan to do is, I'm not going to be too freaky, but I'm going to be honest in what I'm going to say. And I'm going to say it from my heart and soul after having spent 4 decades of my lifetime in uniform. The question that you've asked is a very interesting one. But before that, let me convey my greetings to everyone to commemorate the Army Day of 15 January. It's an occasion which is used to celebrate and to mark the appointment of the first CNC of the Indian Army, General K.M. Cariappa. And to that extent, it would only be befitting on my part that at the outset itself, let me salute all our soldiers who are deployed all over in harsh conditions and who make us comfortable today as we speak, and to those who have made the supreme sacrifice to safeguard the honor and security of this nation. And I often say that the flag of our country does not flutter because of the winds, but it flutters because of the last breath of a soldier who made a supreme sacrifice in honor of that flag. In fact, when you go down to Kohima War Cemetery, it is a World War II war cemetery of the Indian soldiers who fought very bravely there. There's a beautiful tribute in terms of an inscription written there, which says, when you go back home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today. And therefore, I think it's befitting that we salute our soldiers who are giving their today for our tomorrow. Coming down straight to your question now, I think there are 2 parts of it, dealing with national defense and nation building, both important facets of the Indian Army. It's important to understand the construct of national defense and nation building, because national defense and nation building essentially are 2 sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. Unless you have a strong national defense, you cannot build a strong nation. You cannot have nation building. Therefore, national defense is the most critical component of a nation's security and comprehensive national power. That must be understood. In fact, I would say it's a nation's insurance that empowers the democratic institution to pursue its national interests without fear or favor and provide an environment for its people to live in peace and prosperity. And therefore, it is the foundational pillar of the triangle of 3 Ds: defense, development, and diplomacy. There's a very fine quote by Walter Lippmann, and I quote that a nation has security when it does not have to sacrifice its legitimate national interests to avoid war, and if challenged, maintain them by war. That is the essence of national defense and importance of a nation having its security in terms of territorial integrity and threats that it faces. Now, nation building by any nation aims at unification of the people within the state so that it remains politically stable and that it would act as an instrument to enhance the quality of life of its citizens through development and meeting the aspirations of the people in pursuit of happiness. So that is the interface between national defense and nation building. Now, how does the Indian Army play a role in both these, national defense and nation building? Well, the Indian Army has a multi-front, multi-domain security obligation to the nation. Due to the diverse and vast geographical terrain that we have, from the Himalayas to the Rann of Kutch to deserts to northeast jungles to the seas, and you name it, it's a mini world with all types of terrains there. And then there are multiple threats, particularly that we face because of our disputed borders. And disputed borders with two inimical neighbors, namely Pakistan and China, who are revisionist in nature and do not want a stable India. Army is also involved in several internal security challenges, particularly anti-terrorism and anti-insurgency operations. So Indian Army has been the forefront of ensuring the safety and security of the nation. Yet, we must not forget that it comes at a very high cost to precious lives of our gallant soldiers. Today, our nation has the defense forces that have to safeguard more than 15,000 kilometers of diverse land boundaries with 6 nations, more than 7,500 kilometers of coastline, more than 2 million square kilometers of economic zone. And I'm not sure how many of you know, but we have 197 far-flung island territories to guard. Now, this soldier of the Indian Army is operating to guard all this from minus 55 degrees centigrade in Siachen to plus 55 degrees centigrade in the Thar deserts. He stands tall, never giving any scope for the enemy to tinker with our territorial integrity, be it conventional wars, to insurgency, terrorism, or proxy war, or your army will never let you down and allow you to sleep in peace while they stay alive, battling life and death's battle. And I'm reminded of the quote by our Paramveer Chakra Captain Vikram Batra Persamas. He said, either I will come back after hosting the tricolor, or I'll come back wrapped in it, but I will come back for sure. Now that exemplifies the spirit, the morale, the josh, and the patriotism of the soldier to ensure and safeguard the country. Even in nation building, the army continues to be the ultimate anchor during national crisis. When all other organs fail, it's the army which delivers. And you look from roads at far-flung remote places to infrastructure creation by border road organizations, holding medical camps for our citizens in remote areas, from being saviors in evacuation during floods, tsunami, earthquake, and any disaster, natural or man-made, or aid to civil authorities during riots and unrest. The army has been the ultimate savior of the nation and its people. In fact, we have a component of the army called the Territorial Army, and they also look after the reforestation initiatives and have transformed large swaths of land which have been ravaged by natural and man-made disasters. So from ensuring a stable internal environment and external environment, the Indian Army has also participated in out-of-area operations in Sri Lanka, Maldives, at the behest of the nation, and to safeguard our neighborhood security environment. And today, the Indian Army is the third largest provider of UN contingents and manpower for peacekeeping role. So in fact, the Indian Army is the ambassador of the nation, which has earned universal respect for its professionalism and the manner in which it conducts itself. Today, we are proud to have, even in the Army, women officers and women in other ranks who have excelled in all spheres and brought glory to the organization. So what are the qualities, therefore, that make the Indian Army soldier a cut above the rest? An institution that delivers in crisis, a guardian of faith and hope, and an instrument of last resort. Well, Indian Army is a symbol of unity in diversity and secularism, which exemplifies the spirit of one India and the soul of nation above all. The strength of the Indian Army lies in the high standard of discipline, professionalism, patriotism, and selfless service to the nation. And this is supported secular outlook and an apolitical demeanor because it owes its allegiance to the Constitution of India, not to any political party. And therefore, the Supreme Commander is the President of India. The Indian Army's role and capacity in preserving the democratic institution would thus remain the defining fundamentals of national growth and prosperity. Now, when you look at the qualities of an Indian Army soldier, he or she, I would put it as follows. Firstly, professionally, he is second to none. He is defined not by the color, caste, creed, religion, or gender, but by 5 C's, which is character, competence, courage, commitment, and camaraderie. For them, army is just not a profession, but a way of life, and all, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, are brethren in arms. Therefore, his or her color of blood remains olive green, and the blood group is always B positive. They are the best of friends to the friends and the worst of enemy to the enemies. Their religion of the soldier is the religion of the men. The religion of the leader is the religion of the men that he commands. And therefore, we have our religious places known as Sarv Dharm Sthal, in which all gods are there present and send a common message of unity to all of us. And therefore, our belief is Naam, Namak or Nishan, and our DNA is Imandari, Wafadari or Ekta. So I would like to end my response to your first question by assuring our fellow citizens that as India emerges to find its rightful place in the world, so will also threats to its rise come. But the Indian Army will continue to stand tall and be an unyielding bastion of the nation for its national unity and integrity and in nation building. Thank you.
Indeed, sir, we are really proud on our Indian Army, and I think it's a kind of privilege today we got to hear all those things from you. And I must say that the people, those who are watching this session, they will learn many things from it. And not only I think, but I do strongly believe this. Sir, my next question to you is, 2020 had been a year of security challenges and highlighted the need for defense capability building. How do you visualize the threats to national security and the need for upgrading defense preparedness as a priority in spite of COVID-impacted economy?
Yes, 2020 has possibly been the most turbulent year for most countries, possibly the most turbulent after World War II, with the global pandemic taking more than 2 million lives as such. For India, the crisis has been even worse and more severe, with 2 C's striking simultaneously: the Chinese incursion in Ladakh and the Chinese originated of the Wuhan virus, which is COVID-19. And they have posed some of the biggest challenges to the nation in the recent decades. So, in fact, I would say after independence. While COVID-19 has resulted in a catch-22 situation when the choices were saving lives or saving economy for the nation, the Chinese aggression in Ladakh and its intrusions have posed a threat to our national sovereignty and our national integrity. Yet, while the vaccine will overcome COVID-19, the greatest challenge of 2021 remains for the nation the Chinese threat, along with the collusion of its all green and all ever strategic friend Pakistan to our territorial integrity. Along with this is the simultaneously ongoing challenge of proxy war by Pakistan and terrorism. There are no signs presently of disengagement in eastern Ladakh as of date. The chances of Chinese threat escalating in intensity in the summer of 2021 and in fact spreading along the LAC is quite high. Even with a limited conflagration or escalation, we will need defense forces that are combat ready to fight against a technologically superior force that is served by better infrastructure. And therefore, we have to be prepared for the worst and hoping for the best. So to face these challenges, we have to hasten our defense modernization and defense preparedness by matching budgetary support and capabilities in the earliest time frame. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of a nation comes at a cost, and our forces are tasked to win even in a two-front scenario. Therefore, the nation will do well, and its decision makers must acknowledge that this threat is real and take actions to defeat it. Because capability building takes time, and intentions of our adversaries on both the fronts can change very fast. And this requires an integrated and synergized whole of nation approach, proactive approach, which is time sensitive and therefore has to be nation above all, not party politics over all. Like I said earlier, national defense is a foundational pillar for a nation's survival and growth. In fact, today, as we talk, our brave Jawans are facing the constant threat of ceasefire violations on the northern front. Can we allow the loss of our precious of territory of a restricting defense budget? This is a question that I pose to all the decision makers who provide the capability building support and to support and ensure your territorial integrity and safety of your citizens. Simultaneously, I must say that the defense forces will never get the entire wish list. Let's be realistic. So therefore, they need to prioritize based on joint service approach and a criteria of value, vulnerability, and risk analysis so that they get the best bang for the buck. Thank you.
All right, sir. Again, it was really a very quite insightful answer from your side. And I must say, again, I have to say that it's a kind of privilege we got to hear those things from you. Sir, my next question to you is, India has become the third largest military spender in the world after the US and China. according to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute report. This is the first time that India and China are amongst the top military spenders. India also continues to languish into the strategically vulnerable position of being the world's second largest arms importer, just behind Saudi Arabia. What are your views on this situation?
Yeah, it's a very important issue of a nation, capability building and strategic autonomy as such. India has climbed from being the fourth largest defense builder to, in absolute terms of budget, to the third largest, toppling Saudi Arabia, who now becomes the fourth. The first is US, the second is China. In fact, if you look at the first three, US, China, and India, as defense budget spenders, highest, it's very clear that there is enormous tension between US and China, and there is enormous tension between China and India. And therefore, it's only logical that all of them are looking at the defense capability. The common denominator is China, who is creating all this turbulence. So you have to cater for your threat, and that is correct if you have to be there. Yet, I would say figures can be both deceptive and manipulative. And therefore, any figure has to be analyzed in the correct perspective. For example, while India's defense spending, which has been growing in absolute terms and we're now the second largest spender as such, it has been going down as a percentage of its GDP. In fact, the defense allocation of the last budget of 2021, if you exclude the defense pension, the defense budget is just 1.5% of the GDP. It is lower than that percentage of GDP of 1962. If you include the defense pensions, it is 2.4%. In comparison with GDP, Pakistan 4% of its GDP, and the global average is 2.2% of the GDP. So we are far less. So absolute terms is in terms of escalation, in terms of cost of the equipment, but I think we need to measure it also as a percentage of the GDP, which is indicative that we are not doing enough and not giving enough for our defense forces. Secondly, MOD's defense budget pays nearly 5.1 million people, of which 1.4 million are uniformed personnel, 3.2 million are pensioners, and which are both army veterans or defense forces veterans, as well as civilian defense veterans. And then they are serving defense civilians, which is nearly 4 lakh, like 3,98,000 something. Even this issue of defense pension is a narrative which has been wrongly spread. The defense pension percentage is at par with all other central government pension percentages. In fact, in some cases, even lower. So what needs to be seen is what are you allocating to that 1.4 million manpower of the Indian Army. Secondly, there is a mismatch between revenue to defense. The revenue component is 65% and the capital is 35%. In fact, in the army, it is even higher, more than 70 and less than 30. So what needs to be understood is the capital is where you have a modernization rate. So within the capital budget, only 11 to 15% is the amount that is left for modernization. And even in this modernization percentage, there is most of it goes into committed liabilities of what you bought in the previous year, leaving very little for what we call as new schemes. Thus, it results in modernization void. So therefore, I'm saying you have to analyze the budget. Just figures is not good enough, because if you give peanuts, you'll get peanuts, and you can't give peanuts and say they are almonds. So you have to analyze peanuts as peanuts and almonds as almonds. I understand that there's an economic constraint of the nation. That is well understood. We all know that, and we would want all segments of the society to benefit. Yet much more has to be allocated to the defense forces, specifically in the present times. As regards the discredit of being the second largest importer of arms, India has accounted for 9.2% of the total global arms import during 2015 to 2019 as per SIPRI report. And it is behind Saudi Arabia, who's the top importer at 12%. China stands at 5th and Pakistan at 12th. But what is important to also know is between 2010 and 14, and as compared to 2015 to 19, the arms export by India has decreased by 32%. So the trend has been arrested, not only rising, but has been arrested. And also dependencies on certain fixed nations, be it Russia, be it USA, has been diversified to Israel, France, even small countries like South Korea and others. So there has been reduction in the percentage that we are taking, as also diversification as well. But the silver lining that we all must be proud of, that is today India features as 23rd position among the top weapon exporters. We have started our export. It's a baby step towards Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Mauritius, which are basic client, and it may be a negligible 0.2% share of the total global figure. Yet it is a beginning to attain the targets as such. And our Raksha Mantri has set a target of $5 billion by 2025, which comes to, and 80% of that to come from the private industry. So I think we are treading the path correctly. It takes time to shift from an import dependency to an export orientation, and we are following the correct way. Even if you see, we have had major successes. Last decade, DRDO has developed 1,000+ defense technologies, and you recently heard of the hypersonic technology demonstrator vehicle. Today we have self-reliance in missiles, sonars, LCA frigates, corvettes, fourth generation aircrafts, artillery systems, ammunition, small arms. The share of our private industry in defense production has gone up. Certain categories of items have been absolutely left for them, and they have been listed as banned items for imports. So the focus and intentions of the policy change are in the correct direction. There are several, challenges that are there. So I would say that the journey has well begun by taking baby steps, which are showing results. Yet the destination is a long way, and we need to take giant leaps towards that extent.
Indeed, sir. I must say there is a lot to learn from you, but today we are short of time, so I don't want to take you much time. So moving to my last question of this session, actually the question is, what are the challenges to India's defense modernization and Atmanirbhar? Having had a vast experience in handling this in your uniform career and subsequently as consultant OFB, what are your recommendations to foster self-reliance in defense?
Thank you. I think Atmanirbhar, Make in India, Mission Self-Reliance, Vocal for Local are all well-meaning slogans. They are not only a necessity, but an imperative for a nation of the stature of India. A large number of policy initiatives have been recently taken by the government. We are all aware of that, whether it is the new Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, whether it is categorization of by IDDM, Indian Design and Manufacture, Indian Design, Developed and Manufacture, as the first option that must go, whether it is the embargo on defense equipment of the first list being 101 of import, so that domestic market, domestic players get a boost. Whether it's the FDI, which has through the direct open route gone to 74% as an automatic route. Whether it is a separate budget head for domestic capital, whether it's new category global manufacture in India, whether it's the offset policy, which has been more pragmatic, whether it is the technology sharing with the private sector, or the culture of defense innovation. The list is, it can go on. Yet, the policy to outcomes has not been commensurate to the effort and the time. They are very good policies, but policies must result in desired outcomes. There have been outcomes, but not commensurate to the expectations and the goodness of the policy. And if you look at today, we do not have a single defense manufacturing firm in 2020 as the index has been given out. In fact, in the top 100, HAL is number 45 and BEL is at number 61. And you have nations like Singapore, Israel, Brazil, who are there. And look at India, such a nation with so much of human resource potential and brains, yet are in the top 50 and only 2 in top 100. We have improved from the Global Innovation Index from being 52nd to being 48th now. But I think we have a lot of potential, like I was saying. In fact, if I would compare India to a student, I would say it has a potential of A++ grade, yet is delivering a B+ capability. So there is a lot that the nation can do. So what are the shortcomings? I think, to my experience in uniform and thereafter as a consultant on the Ordnance Factory Board and dealing with the ministry and understanding and the entire process as such, I think the first thing is the defense budgetary allocation. That has to be, if you have money, you'll buy. And that has to be there, especially the big tickets. Even in our defense R&D, we need to spend much more. There have been improvements, but we need to spend more. I think we're spending somewhere around 6 to 7% of the defense allocation in R&D. Look at China having 20%, the US having 12%. So we have to, unless you spend and generate your own technologies, not only through the DPSU and DRDO, but through the private sector, not only in platforms, but in manufacturing technologies as such and integrative technologies, I'm afraid you will have technology dependency on others. You have to spend and give the impetus. And it's well known that however much you may spend, only 10% of what you've spent will give the result. This is the universal formula for technology, and you must accept it. Second is the lack of continuity of policies and predictability of a business partner. If this is the biggest hurdle that a private industry and a foreign placing. It takes 7 to 8 years for a big ticket procurement to to start and to fructify. And every 4 to 5 years, it's going to change the policy and the defense acquisition procedure, or earlier known as the DPP, Defense Procurement Procedure. Then, it doesn't make good business because there's uncertainty. And anyone entering into this has to be certain that what he's spending will result in an outcome which will be beneficial. So this lack of continuity of policies and predictability is a major hindrance today for both the private industry as well as foreign player. Because there's no risk-sharing, gain-sharing formula. In fact, it's a game of snakes and ladders in which there are more snakes than the ladders. So therefore, his apprehensions of investment are there, capabilities are there, but his apprehensions are there. Second, there are multiple stakeholders in this process. The user, the developer, whether it's DRDO or other one, the manufacturer, the decision makers, the MOD, the bureaucrats, and whole lot of them. Unless they function as a team with the stakeholders, the outcome will not be there. We are functioning in silos, compartments, and therefore there is little interface and understanding and moving ahead as a team, and that's how products do not come. Even our bureaucratic chains are very killing and dissuasive. Takes so much of time. Things have improved, but still it is. Therefore, if you're going to make a policy and you're going to have the old mindsets and you're going to have old structures in place, I'm afraid the outcome will not be common sense. You have to bring change. The policies will bring change. The structures must be responsive to the policy. And most importantly, those who are going to execute and who are going to give decisions must have a change of mindsets. That is important. So that will give a boost to our defense industrial base and ecosystem. So I have 6 points straight away for recommendations for this year. First is budgetary support and the concept of preference to the indigenous industry. Yes, you have come up with a domestic capital fund, but it has to be a non-lapsable fund, which must be a roll-on fund. Your defense budget must be increased to 2 to 2.5% of our GDP, less pensions as such. Second, you must look at risk sharing and gain sharing. Whatever the development cost of a major platform is enormous, it must result in assurances of a viable order so that they look at the complete model as a business model and encourages them to invest. Similarly, R&D must be a major focus area, homegrown R&D. And therefore, our import substitution and indigenous content has to go up. We have to go more for indigenization, indigenous production, and import substitution. This will help us to clearly move ahead on the path of strategic autonomy and make in India. Even when we talk of components, import substitution, and we talk of items that we are going to buy an IPR holding, we have to strengthen the process of cost indexing of technology and equipment pricing model. We have to do this if we have to move ahead. And therefore, we require a collaborative approach, no cocoon approach, and in which we have to integrate not only the big player industry, but MSME, new startups, so that there's a space for everyone to exist and to come up with a pragmatic model as such. So I would like to conclude this by saying that Make in India is not a magic wand. Atmanirbhar is not a magic wand that you do it and overnight it becomes. It will take time. So we require patience. We require understanding. We require an external view of what we are doing internally so that we do a mid-course correction. We require to change our structures and mindsets of people who are part of the decision making. And we have to accept that Make in India will happen in stages. First it will be Make for India, then it will be Made in India, then it will be Make in India, and hopefully then it will be Make for the world. So it's a transition, but yet we must be very clear how do we move ahead in timelines. Thank you.
Very meaningful, sir. Again, I have to say that it's a kind of privilege we got, and it was a healthy discussion with you over the topic. We look forward to conduct more sessions with you in future. Thank you so much, sir, for joining and giving your important time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you and your audience. And once again, a very happy Army Day to all of you. And I'm sure each one of you would be proud of your Indian Army and the soldier who stands as the guardian of the nation. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir. Thank you so much.
On the ground is where I stand. Never give up, that was always the plan. It's so cold outside. I'm alone, I'm alright. It's so cold outside. I'm alone.